Hey everyone, it's Camber here with YoPro Know. We are here today with Blake Bozarth, 31-year-old founder and CEO of CoThryve, which he will talk about in a little bit. He is currently living in Orlando, Florida, and Blake and I actually reconnected during COVID-19 timeline. We actually reconnected because we were both at my first job together. So he is going to talk a little bit about his time at the company where he spent nearly a decade. And I'm really lucky that we were able to reconnect a couple years later. And it just shows that at the end of the day, everyone is always interconnected in some capacity. And I'm glad that we were able to have this opportunity. So Blake, we're going to turn it over to you. First off, just give us a background, who you are, where you're from, and then we'll dive into the details and hear all about CoThryve.
Thank you. Well, first, let me just say that I am honored to be on this show with you. I love what you're building, Camber, and the YoPro Know is just like it's an amazing network already, and I'm loving seeing how it's growing and what it's doing. So thank you for having me part. In terms of my background, let's see where to start. I guess I'll start with my college years. So I went to college in Chattanooga area. It's a small Christian liberal arts school called Covenant College on top of Lookout Mountain. Great experience. Loved actually the small school feel. I always thought I was going to do something in public service, politics. And so I was an econ major, loved that study. So I always kind of was thinking, I'm going to do law school after this, not because I want to be an attorney per se, but just because that feels like it's the next right step. And long story short, one of my professors and advisors was like, hey, I know you're thinking law school, but there's this company that is doing this leadership development program. You should take a look at it. And it's the same program, by the way, that me and Cameron both did. And so that's a spoiler alert. I looked at it, and it was a great program. It was with a Fortune 250 company that was headquartered out of Chattanooga. It's an insurance company. Nobody grows up thinking they're going to work in insurance. That's what we always like to laugh about. But it was honestly an incredible experience working across a global enterprise. And as part of this program, you did like 12 to 18 month rotations in different parts of the company. So got to spend some time in the operations, got to spend some time in sales, marketing, and a strategy role, and just really, really got a lot of experience, got a lot of great connections in that. We were just talking, Cameron, about the incredible people that were there. So it was phenomenal. Also, I never really saw myself working in corporate America though. So it was kind of surprising for me, but I ended up loving it. But with that said, the longer that I was there, the more of my own kind of entrepreneurial drive was coming out. And I was scratching that itch a lot of different ways. I started to build a real estate portfolio. So that was like one of the key ways that was getting some of the more entrepreneurial stuff out of me. But ultimately I just had I had a burning passion and burden for mentoring and really helping create other leaders and helping pour into other leaders. And it started kind of happening naturally in within the company, different people coming up saying, hey, I see what you've done in your career so far. Would you meet with me? And I loved that. And then it started happening more in the community, the more I got involved in the Chattanooga area. And I just had this realization that, hey, I think this is my purpose in life. Like I want to be pouring into and equipping other leaders. And I'm just kind of a geek and a nerd about leadership development and personal growth. I've gotten really into that over the last 5 years. And that's where CoThryve was born. So I ended up making the transition out of the corporate world and into CoThryve.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that recap. I think that is a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about today, which is your business, CoThryve. And just really briefly for those who are not familiar with CoThryve, Blake focuses on helping professionals develop their high potential talent. And so I know that I'm really interested in hearing more about your company, and I know everyone else will be interested to see what CoThryve actually does. And then we'll dive into more of those details about how to navigate a corporate job and to grow your influence in those jobs.
Love it. So more about what we do. So our main model and focus is working with companies to help them develop their high potentials, just like you said. So companies like the one that we worked at actually have programs for what they consider their high potential talent, where they're trying to recruit top students And then they're trying to develop them into future senior leaders in the company. And there's a lot of companies that don't necessarily have formal programs for that. And we work with both. So we work with small to medium-sized companies and large companies as well. And our focus is really on our specialty, I should say, is on that high potential pool. But we also work with leadership teams, and we use something that we're kind of pioneering. We call it collective leadership development. And that's essentially a fancy way of saying we really believe in the power of the peer group for developing and growing leaders. So entrepreneurs for centuries have used what they call mastermind groups. And so a lot of us, I'm sure you're familiar with those. A lot of your audience may be familiar with those. Companies, not so much, not as familiar with those. CEOs and business owners definitely have like roundtables and masterminds that they'll do. But within companies, there hasn't really been this, I guess, embracing of the mastermind concept. And that's what we do at CoThryve, is we help you run basically internal masterminds. And so you identify a group of high potentials that you really want to invest in, and we bring them together in a structured, kind of facilitated mastermind that's all about helping them grow personally and as leaders. And the power that comes to play when you have growth-oriented, purpose-driven peers sharpening each other is amazing. And so one of the systems that we use, we also use it in the Facebook group that I know that you're part of now, is what we call our 4x4 system. So it's choosing the 4 things that you're committing to getting done over the next 4 weeks. So 4x4, that's going to drive the most value for you in your life. So it should be the 4 most important things. Don't stress over it. Just pick 4 really important things. And you give yourself this time limit of a month to say, I'm going to get these things done by the end of the month. And number one, just taking the time to focus and get clarity on what's really important to you to accomplish, because we all have this laundry list of things that we want to get done. There's a lot of value in that, just taking that time to get the focus and clarity. But 2, when you share it out and you get the encouragement and the accountability that comes from sharing it out from other peers, it's like, for me personally, as long as I've been doing these groups, it baffles me at the end of the month how much I was actually able to get done. I don't always get all 4 of them done because we want them to be stretch goals, but it's unbelievable how much more you can accomplish when you're surrounding yourself with other growth-oriented peers. So we do that for companies, and we're also doing that for individuals as well in that Facebook group too. So we're building a community that we call Leadership on Purpose, and invite anyone who's interested in leadership and in personal growth to check us out there too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that you said that you obviously, you're solely working with these companies, but so obviously the individuals come into play when you have these virtual, if you will, roundtables, in the form of a Facebook group. But people who are, in our audience today, how can they link up with CoThryve?
Yeah, so that's so our primary distribution model, if you will, where we make our money, is working with companies. But I am so passionate about equipping leaders, because I think that when you build strong, purpose-driven leaders, that's how you transform the world. Okay. And one of the best and most effective ways we do that is through working with companies, but we're also building a broader community. And so an easy way to connect with us is on the socials, on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you personally on there. But we also have a company page, CoThryve, on LinkedIn and Facebook. We're really active on Facebook now because we're actually building that community that you don't have to be sponsored by your employer. You can just be any professional who really wants to grow their leadership and take part of that. So we do that 4x4 system, but we're also doing content throughout the week too, that's designed to help encourage you, sharpen you, grow your tools, expand your mindset. So that's a really good way to connect with us too, is through that Facebook group.
Great. And I know I went a little backwards, because usually I talk about how we can connect with our interviewees at the end of the interview. So I will share that. We'll reiterate that. But now I want to pivot a little bit and talk about your experience in the corporate world. As you mentioned already, you spent almost a decade there. Talk about how you navigated that. And yeah, you're so old, right? No, Blake is 31 for those of you listening. And so, because it's always important, I think, to share what place, you're in your young professional career. And so in the workplace, but talk about that, like navigating your career in those almost 10 years and how that looked in terms of navigating the ranks. I think our listeners will be really interested.
Yes. So this is probably what I got the most when I was going through the almost 10 years at Unum was, how do I navigate my career here? It's a huge company. What is it?
10,000 employees, right? Sorry to interrupt.
About 10,000 employees. Yep. How do I get seen? How do I grow my influence basically here and grow in my career? And there's no single answer to that, but I have thought a lot about that and tried to add some structure for how can you work on growing your influence and apply that to navigating a career within a big corporation or even a smaller company. And I think there's really three keys to growing your influence. The first is competence. I'll just go and give you all three. So there's competence, there's character, and then there's relationships. So competence is probably the easiest place to start because it's really about what you know and what you can do. So the more you know and the more that you can do, the more your influence is going to grow. And that's the way that a free market works in general. But the more value that you're bringing to the table, and in a job, the way you bring value to the table is by what you know and what you can do. And so that's the first place to start. And I like to encourage people to become an expert in something. So actually, like if you've heard the phrase, everybody's heard it, jack of all trades, master of none. That was actually a misquote. So Ben Franklin said that. I found this fascinating. Ben Franklin said that, but he actually said his actual quote was jack of all trades, master of one. So his whole point in saying that actually was to say, hey, it's good to be well-rounded, absolutely, but you should be a master of something. Mm-hmm. So think about that for yourself. Think about what that is. And I just encourage people to basically pick their thing, pick their craft. What are they going to be really good at? And it could be, your craft could be that I'm really good at managing people. Mm-hmm. That's great. And maybe you can be plugged into all sorts of different departments and different parts of the company. That's phenomenal. But pick the craft that you're going to hone. Mm-hmm. And then I like to say, Michael Jordan, your craft. So pursue that with almost obsession, mm-hmm. in a healthy way, but pursue that in a way that you're actually pursuing mastery, that you want to become the go-to person. And when someone thinks of XYZ, they think of you, because you've spent so much time, so much effort in building that. So ultimately, when your success breeds success, so the more that you're demonstrating a track record of success, that credibility builds on itself over time. And you can really grow your influence by becoming more competent. So that's the first thing. Second thing is character. It's kind of self-explanatory, but character is who you are. And so the way I like to think about it is that I personally am really impressed by super competent and talented people, but I'm inspired by people who are genuine and who have super high character, who have purpose that is so much larger and bigger than themselves, So that, like, focusing on growing your character, that living your life in a way that gives you the right to be followed and to have influence, that level of authority, that level of influence is so much higher than positional influence or influence that you get from having the title. Just being the example, being someone that people want to follow. Mm-hmm. And you do that by focusing on your character. So it's things like integrity, it's things like trustworthiness, your work ethic, your humility. Humility is, I think, extremely attractive to people, and a counterintuitive way really to grow your influence. If we look out today, like the people that are the influencers, a lot of them are the people that are beating on their chest, mm-hmm. but and tooting their own horn. But in the grand scheme of things, they're not the people that most of us really want to follow.
Right.
We might be impressed by them, but we're not
Ironic.
moved. We're not moved by people that are in it for themselves. So the more that you work on your character, and as part of my personal growth plan, I like to get intentional about a leadership growth plan. Is I want to be more and more driven by purpose than by ego. And I think it, like ego, like we usually think of it as the person who is beating their chest and tooting their own horn, the me monster. But if ego is also when we value our comfort over our cause. So, and that's what I find for myself a lot of times is that I have this higher purpose. I have this burden for reaching and developing and inspiring and equipping leaders. But too often I end up valuing my own comfort, in that I don't like, I want to have all my ducks in a row. I want everything to look polished and perfect. And it's because I care too much about the way I look versus the cause. So anyways, that for me, I give that as an example of character of where I am growing, and the person that I'm becoming is someone who really is more driven by my purpose, by my cause, than by my ego, than by my comfort. And so I think we can all, if you take a hard look at yourself, you can identify those areas in yourself that you can grow your character and really make yourself someone who people want to follow, right? And you can actually have more influence. So anyways, the last thing is relationships. And this is so key to growing your influence. It's who you know, it's who knows you. And one of the best phrases on this is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And so when you're authentic and when you're intentional to build strong relationships with people across the organization. So a lot of times when people want to grow their influence in a company, they think about what senior leaders can I get to know, and can I build relationships with? And that's great. You should be intentional to do that. You want to know those kind of movers and shakers, absolutely. But I think it's honestly just as important, if not more important, to be intentional in building strong relationships with your peers, and with people that are even below you in terms of rank and title. I think that goes a super long way when you're somebody who has strong relationships across the organization. And then the last kind of tip on relationships is to really understand leadership styles and their personalities. So know what makes people tick, know what your direct manager, know what makes them tick, know what they care about, know what they value, and put yourself in their shoes as much as you can, and be proactive in bringing them the things that they value. The more that you do that, the more that you're going to be relied upon, and the strong relationship that you'll have with them too. So those are just that's the framework that I use, the competence, the character, the relationships, and hopefully some practical tips there along the way too.
Absolutely. I think one thing that really stood out to me, and there were so many great points that you just mentioned there, is that we are always growing, like True. This is not just something like, all right, if you're competent, if you have good character and you have good relationships, like you've made it. This is something that we all always have to work through and work on. And I think that this is really applicable to everyone who is listening to this, not just people who are in the corporate world, because you want to become an expert in something in any field that you're in. You want to have good character in any field that you're in. And in the end of the day, it is all about who you know and the relationships that you build and how you're perceived among people, whether they're your peers, whether they're beneath you in ranking, whether they're above you. And so this is just really applicable to everyone, not necessarily in the corporate field. So I really thank you and appreciate your sharing this.
I just want to emphasize what you said in terms of always growing. So there's a book out now. It's written by a friend of mine. His name's Ben Hardy. The book is called Personality Isn't Permanent. We've talked about this. But he breaks down this concept where he distinguishes between your past, your present, and your future self. So you have a distinct past, a present self, and a future self. And so much of the time we end up just defining ourselves based off of our past and based off our present. And we don't actually get intentional about creating our future self. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most powerful questions that a leader can ask, and that someone who's looking to grow their influence, someone who's early in their career, anyone, but particularly someone who's looking to grow their influence, one of the most powerful questions you can ask is who are you becoming? Who is that future self? Do you have a clear picture and a clear vision of who you're becoming? And when you take the time to do that, when you take the time to actually map out like who you want to be as a leader, what is your, like, what do you want to be known for? What's your personal or leadership brand? When you take the time to like get specific about that sort of stuff, it's incredible the way that affects your present and the way that you act in the present. So I don't know if you ever saw, but Matthew McConaughey, there's like a viral YouTube clip, you can look it up, where he talks about like somebody asks him when he was younger, who did he want to be when he grew up? Who did he want to be when he grew up? And he said, you know what? I want to be me 10 years from now. So he, they came back and followed up with him 10 years from there, and they said, hey, 10 years later, what's up? Now what? He's like, I still want to be me 10 years from now. And it goes on and it goes on because you're constantly pursuing growth, and you're constantly pursuing a better, more grounded, more balanced, more secure version of yourself. And really all of that should be driven by a higher purpose. And so that's part of what we do at CoThryve too, is we help people identify and choose what their purpose is and make big goals around your purpose. And the bigger that purpose is, the bigger your future is, the better the present is too. So yes, well, it's always a growth journey.
Always. And thanks for adding that. I think that's a great way to wrap up our time here today. So Blake, thank you so much for joining us. I do really think I'm so excited to watch CoThryve thrive. Sorry, I had to throw it in there. And continue to grow, because I think we've talked about this before. I think there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of overlap in what we're doing with the YoPro Know and CoThryve, because we are all about developing future leaders. We are young professionals are going to be leading our workplace, our world in the future, in the very near future.
It's here now. It's crazy. Yes.
Yeah, it is. And so it's going to be really important for organizations like ours to really work together in the future. And so I'm excited to see what comes next for you.
I love it, Camber. I feel the same way. Lots of synergy, lots of good things to come.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Blake. We've enjoyed having you on the show.
Thanks, Camber. Take care.